Good morning, dear friends. Today is Wednesday, Cheshvan 7, the 7th of Mar Cheshvan, a big day. Get there in a moment, October 13th. And we're studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Presently, Mesechet Shabbat, chapter 8. We're on Pei Aleph, that's 81a. We are but a few days away from finishing the whole chapter, the whole 8th chapter of Mesechet Shabbos. And today we're going to start a new Mishnah. Today, if I'm not mistaken, the 7th of Cheshvan is a big day because it's the day that the Jews of Israel begin to say, they make a request for rain. As we know in the prayers, there is the reference, we mention Geshem, Mashiv Haruach Umar Geshem. That's in the beginning of Shemona Esrei, but in the bracha, where we, in the blessing or the prayer, where we ask for prosperity and the crops, if you will, and bracha. So we reference rain, and we ask Hashem for rain. In the bracha of Baruch Aleinu, in Israel, they begin on Mar Cheshvan the 7th, and the reason being because that was the day that the furthest pilgrim who was making Aliyah and going up on the holidays to Eretz Yisrael would arrive at home. So first of all, let's put ourselves in the shoes of someone that's traveling so long. To us, the holidays are a far away, forgotten highlight that happened long ago. But some pilgrims until today, they were still traveling. So it reminds us of their devotion, but it also reminds us of the way Yiddishkeit looks at things, where, you know, it was worthy. Although Israel needs rain, they wouldn't ask for it until the last person was home, which Dr. Hammer, I guess it has some pertinence to the conversations that we've been having privately, where we have to be accommodating and concerned for everybody, and make sure that there's a space where people are comfortable and accommodated. And so certainly a worthy of art and a good thing to bear in mind. So now we'll share the screen and we'll begin our new Mishnah. We're gonna have some fun today. I'm just giving you a heads up, but we'll do our best here. Etzem. So we read this Mishnah yesterday. I just want to go through it fast again so we can get back to the Gemara. We're still talking about the sizes, the measures of stuff that's useful. Now we're talking about raw materials that will be converted into more useful things. We already spoke 2 days ago about a quill, or rather about reeds that are turned to quills and other materials. Yesterday we spoke about Adama, earth, and the sand and fine sand, and cooking an egg, if you recall. So today we're going to talk about more substances and how much is useful, therefore how much is prohibited on Shabbos. I just want to remind you that many times the machlokiot, the debates that we encounter in the Mishnah between two different opinions, many times is a question of if something has multiple uses, one is the prevalent use and one is a less common use. Are we going to seize on the less common use if it makes a chumrah, if it makes the measure even smaller, or do we look at the prevalent use? Let's just bear that in mind. And now let's start the Mishnah again. Etzem, bone. Bone was once a valuable commodity. You could make many things out of it. From the earliest times in the earliest civilizations, or what we might call even prior to civilization as we know it, human beings were known to use bone to make different implements and tools. And the time of the Mishnah, of course, we're talking about a more civilized society. So what are you going to do with a bone? They don't say an arrowhead, but they say kedei lasos tarvad, to make a spoon. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kedei lasos mameno chaf. Hold on, I'm sorry, one second. I hit mute all, but as always, I'm going to ask everyone to please unmute yourself. We want to hear your voice. There was just some background noise, and so etzem kedei lasos tarvad, a bone is useful to turn into a spoon. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kedei lasos mameno chaf. Rabbi Yehuda says to turn it into a key. The Gemara is going to discuss what it means to turn a bone into a key, and is a key something that's larger than a spoon or smaller than a spoon? And then when the Gemara asks that, we're going to have to contemplate if the keys of the time of the Mishnah look like our keys today. So we'll get there. Zechuchis, glass. What do you do with glass, or what's the use for a smallest piece of glass? Kidei ligor barosha karkar. It can be used to scrape the bobbin. Yesterday, we spent some time exploring what a bobbin was, and we discovered that Rabbi Steinsaltz's explanation of a bobbin as a pointy stick used to smooth out stuff, thread, is not exactly what a modern bobbin is, but we'll visit that more soon. Tsurorai Evan, what about stones? The Mishnah says to use to scare away a bird, to throw at a bird. Rabbi Yaakov says, no, we're not talking about the use of a stone to throw at a bird. We're talking about the stone to throw at an animal. Again, the Mishnah now, without much explanation, sounds as if we're promoting cruelty to animals. It's obviously not what we're talking about. And that too, the Gemara will elaborate. Let's take a look at some Rashis. Chaf. This is the key. So Rashi tells us, Kasalka Daitach, our initial assumption is the Poiseches Shel Chaf Asma. We're talking about the key, the Shiura Nofish Mitarvud. And the key of the Mishnah is going to be a larger item than a spoon. So today, by the way, I'm fairly certain that a spoon would potentially be considered larger than a key. Or I should say a key would be understood to be smaller than a spoon. So again, Rashi's giving us a preview of the Gemara's discussion. Suffice it to say, ancient keys were a little bigger and a little bulkier than the keys today. Karkar, eitz yesh le'argim v'reish echad. It's a piece of wood that's used by weavers, and it's pointy end. Kidei lizrak b'behema, v'lei tarach inish l'mishkol tzurah mishum oif. The question is, if a bird is getting on your nerves, or an animal is getting on your nerves, they need to be encouraged to move. So would you use a stone by a bird, or is it the kind of thing that you'll just scare away? Again, why would you need to scare a bird? We're going to have to Mirza Hashem will discuss that a little later in the Gemara. Let's just do one thing here.
Yeah, I think there's a difference though between tzor and even. A tzor usually is a handful of stone. So
are you sure? I think a tzor is a smaller stone. A pebble is usually, I think, how we translate it. An even is a stone, which is, at least again, I haven't.
Maybe today it's different than it was then, but a tzor.
Why? What would you say in modern?
Tzor would be a cluster, like a few of something. Tzor matbeot. I'll Google it.
Interesting. Okay, interesting.
I mean, we can continue. We don't have to wait for this.
Huh. You know what's funny? Here they translate surah as a wood chip, a piece of wood. Does that make sense?
Not to me.
Okay, basically here we have a collection of commentaries. There are those who want to translate it as a piece of wood. I don't believe that's what modern Ivrit would use as a tzur. Another commentary says that it's like a piece of dried mud or lime. And others write that we're talking about tzur even, which is a small pebble. And so I guess tzur on its own doesn't necessarily mean a stone, tzur even. But let's do something really fast over here. Sror, how would you translate sror? Funny. Oh, here. The Sepharia, the Klein dictionary says sror is a little stone or pebble. However, the pialim.com dictionary says that sror could mean a package bundle burst or gunfire. I don't think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I also Googled it on translation. So here it's a bundle or
Soror.
But that's today. That's Hebrew used today. And the Mishnah time, so may have meant something else.
So suffice it to say the Mishnaic, here, you're gonna have to indulge me one more moment. The Mishnaic commentaries here, this is the Mishnah. Oh, it's not the Mishnah. What did I do? Here we go. Open. course, ultimately, it's the least of the issues of this Mishnah. Just curious to see if anything comment. All right, we'll move on.
No.
Continue. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to agree with Menachem in the sense that when we say in the Kel Mole, Tzrur b'Tzrur Achayim, it's together. It would make sense that it's like a bundle, So
Indeed. So the word Tzrur has multiple, or has varying uses. Obviously, even in ancient Hebrew.
But in the real world, what I picture is picking up some gravel for a small bird and just throwing it rather than a big rock.
Right.
It's easier to pick up a few small stones than to find one pebble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let's just. Bear with me another second. Talmud Chabura.
What happened to scarecrows in those days?
Oh, you're right. All right, I just posted a picture of the Talmud Chabura. We'll show it on the screen, but it'll be for reference in a moment. Although probably Wikipedia will help us just as much, if not more. Open image. All right, we'll get back to that. Now let's see the Gemara. So the Gemara says, the Memra, the Shiura de Rabbi Yehuda Nafish. We always say that Rabbi Yehuda has a more machmir, a smaller measurement that's useful and therefore prohibited from using. Hakaimalon, the Shiura de Rabbanan Nafish. Usually the Chachamim, the rabbis, have a larger size, a more lenient position in the context of what you can or can't carry, or more precisely, what one could be liable to bring a chat. Rashi v'kaimel the shir the Rabbanan Nafish. Yeah. Amar Ula, Allah answers, what we're talking about here is Chafei poi sachas. Rashi, Shinayim hakevuyim ba, it's the teeth of a key. V'loihi atzma, but not the whole key. So today, you get a piece of metal, you have a key, or let's say in Eretz Yisrael, you have like the cheaper locks that all have like that standard skeleton-looking key, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they have in America too, but I only saw that when I was in Eretz Yisrael. You have like that standard key. In America, you just have that little, ridge that you use. You could use you could use your nail if you have a long enough nail or whatever. But in Israel, they have those keys. But in the times of the Mishnah, in ancient times, we can imagine that people, and we've seen maybe skeleton-like keys, but perhaps the base of the key was the same, and just the teeth were selected relative to the specific door. Again, these are all keys that are probably not even exactly what we're imagining, but suffice it to say, we can all imagine a key that has teeth that are able to be attached.
Rabbi, if you want to know the size of the keys, do you go to a veterinarian or a dentist? A key in Yiddish is a cow.
Okay, this is not really going to help us, but it's going to help us to tell us that we don't really know what a key looked like in the Mishnah time. Because here, these are 2,000 euro.
Those are keys from the 1600s.
Where?
The ones before.
So hold on, but I want to show you this.
Because I have a piece of furniture from 1600s and it's got a key.
And what does the key look like?
Like the other ones, like these over here. The ones with the round.
You go to a hotel in Europe, you need help to carry the key.
So here, look, this is a Roman key.
You remember they said with Korach he had so much jewels that he needed. I don't know how many mules.
He needed donkeys for his keys, right? He had donkeys for his keys.
The keys must have been could have been kind of heavy, or he had a lot.
Right. Okay. So suffice it to say, looking at these pictures of keys, we understand that a key was a little more bulky, and a little more complex than our keys today. Now I'll show you what our Gemara here, no, what the Mesifta Gemara understands to be a key. So here, it draws for us a key, which is kind of like how we would visualize it. But I guess they understand that this thing is an attachment that you plug in, and that is the key that manipulates the key. Alternatively, the Shinei HaMafteach are not part of a key at all. Rather, they're the stuff on the inside of the door that are in your locking mechanism that are triggered by the key. So although my instinctive imagination was that it's a piece that's attached to the key, here, based on other commentaries, it's actually a part of the locking mechanism and not the key at all. And so here there are two proposed ways to envision the teeth of the key or the mechanism that's triggered by the lock. So whatever the case is, no matter how precisely we are to imagine the key and the teeth of the keys that we're talking about a smaller piece in the mechanism of the key, and therefore we have protected the consistency of our rule that the Chachamim's measure is typically considerably larger. And so when Rabbi Yehuda says the key, he doesn't mean the key, he means a component of the lock mechanism. That's not what I understood from Rashi. So either we're talking about the teeth of the key itself are transportable, but others say it's this these parts of the mechanism. Rabbi Steinsaltz too seems to indicate more like what I'm telling you initially, that it's part of the actual key. But there we have it. Amar Ula. Chafi Paisachas. We're talking about the teeth of the key. Taner Rabbanan, what's the deal? Is there a talk of these teeth of the keys? So Chafi Paisachas Tahirim. These keys are tahar. Kava b'paisachan tmeim. Once they are attached, then they are susceptible to ritual impurity. V'shalgal afal pi shechibra medelas. Okay. If they are part of the lock, which I guess is the pictures that I was showing you, afal pi shechibra medelas lekava masmarim tayrim. Although they are affixed, they're still tar. Shekol mechuber lekarka areu kekarka. Because those key mechanisms were attached to the ground, says this Braisa, and therefore they maintain ritual purity. So let me just tell you what's going on over here. What's going on over here is we are showing a precedent for the fact that keys have these teeth, and that when it comes to the laws of purity, we should know that until they're attached to the key, they are not mikabel tuma. Now, I could see a situation where this Brisa is actually a challenge to our explanation with the teeth of the key, but let's leave it as is. Let's read Rashi. Chafi poisachas tahern. The chosman shalei chibram ba. Once it's not, until it's attached to the key, einan re'uyim leklum. There's nothing you can do with a key, with a tooth of a key, if it's not a part of a key. Rashi tmeim dechli etzem kichli matchay supshtem tmeim b'hakol shechatem. Long story short, bone has the same halacha as metal, that when it's created for function and it's useful, it can become ritually impure.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Why are we so worried that Rabbi Yehuda has to rule the same way all over the place? Maybe in some cases he could lean one way, other cases lean another. Why are we so, he has to be 100% consistent?
We have a stated principle that the Chachamim have a larger measure, and we're talking about a very narrow space in the halacha, where essentially there are two philosophies of which measure is significant. Either we're going to follow the smallest item so long as it's ever applied, or we're going to use what's more prevalently used. And yes, we expect the rabbis, Chachamim, and Rabbi Yehuda to be consistent with their principles. Why would they vary from matter to matter, unless there was a specific reason?
You have with Hillel and Shammai. Sometimes, in rare occasions, they go the other way. But
that's in separate subjects. Here we're dealing with a very narrow discussion, which is the shiur of carrying on Shabbos. Now, you're actually correct that it is plausible that they could vary in their opinion. But at the very least, if there is some variation in their stated opinion, then the answer would be, here's the reason why the Chachamim here are smaller and Rabbi Yehuda is larger. But absent an explanation, we're comfortable falling back on the default, which is that predictably, Rabbi Yehuda's Shita is the smaller item, Chachamim are a larger item, so much so that we can use this principle to understand the precise nature of the item that Rabbi Yehuda is describing or that the Chachamim are describing. So it's a good question. Your question is a good question. And it's not implausible that there'd be a variation, but any deviation from the principle warrants an explanation, and the question either affords us to find the explanation or to tighten up our definition of the item that is the smallest possible use of a bone in this instance. Bro, is that a fair explanation?
Yeah.
This is the same Rabbi Yehuda that's Rabbi Yehuda and a C, right?
No.
It's a different Rabbi Yehuda.
Yeah. If you want to see who you see, according to the.
All right, so he's a Tana.
He's a Tana. Yeah. We're quoting Mishnahs right. And Brises. He would have. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this is the first section, which again is discussing the use of bone. What is the most common use of bone? We could imagine it was to make not silverware, but cutlery. That apparently is the prevalent use of bone in that time and then to this day. Less common would be to make the component of a key, particularly because the teeth of the key, according to that interpretation, is not very functional on its own. But let's just do one more thing. Keys made of bone. Oh, you see piano keys. Now we're going to talk about pianos. Okay. So we're probably not going to get in. Oh. All right, whatever. Anyways.
Wouldn't they have a tendency to dry out? Correct?
I believe metal, if you could, is going to probably be more. It's probably more prevalent, but I don't know beyond what the Gemara is telling us. One more moment. All right, we'll get to this later. Further in the Gemara. Zechuchis. So the Mishnah continues and says that glass, what is the use of glass? What is the smallest piece of glass that's functional? Kedei ligraba, to scrape and sharpen this wooden pointy thing. Tana, zechuchis. Why is zechuchis called, or what is the etymology of the word zechuchis? Kedei liv soya. I'm sorry, no. Zechuchis kedei liv soya ba shnei nimin ka'achas. It's sharpen. It's a piece of glass that is sharp enough to cut two threads at the same time. And apparently, we're saying that one might have a little piece of glass handy when they are doing work with threads, with yarn, with weaving, and that is the smallest piece of glass the smallest use for a piece of glass, or the smallest piece of glass that's useful, and therefore you can't carry it. And once upon a time, you wanted to use everything, and I guess instead of buying a knife, which might have been very expensive, you might take for yourself a little piece of glass. Now, interestingly enough, let's take a look at this word. Is it spelled zichuchis with a zayin or sichuchis with a samach? So Rebbe Menachem is going to confirm for us, I hope, that in spoken Hebrew, the word is absolutely zichuchit with a zayin, correct?
Correct.
Would you ever imagine spelling zichuchit with a samach?
No.
No. But Rashi tells us that you should know that the word zichuchit with a zayin is in its origin or the word developed from another Hebrew word, which actually does have a samach. Zichuchit al shem shesuchin, which I believe suchin, based on my perusal of other commentaries, means that you look through it, that it's transparent. And so because you can see through it, kari sichuchis. Hashem shizaka kari zichuchis. Because I'm sorry, you look through a glass, you see through it. But you also have the fact that it is very clear and transparent. And so the word zichuchit is actually the fusion of two different words. Sichuchit, you look through it, and zaka, that it is clear and transparent. And so collectively, we have this new word called zichuchit. Very interesting that Rashi is giving us a lesson on the etymology of the word zichuchit. Very interesting. It's not often that you have a Rashi that does that for us, but I'll tell you what, Rashi, like we, are alarmed at this word zichuchit, but now we understand that it means zichuchit. Very interesting. Let's see if anybody else weighs in on this topic. At least that's available to us on Safari. And alas, no. So what is the measure of glass that's useful? If it can cut for you 2 threads, which I don't imagine we're talking about a very large piece of glass, but maybe once upon a time there was an expectation that you'd have a shear of that type. All right, let's go on to the next item. Any comments?
It sounds to me that glass is very ambiguous, because if you have a large piece of glass, the edge is just as sharp as a small piece of glass, and both can cut 2 threads right away.
Right. So let help us out over here. Let's think this through. So our Mishnah is talking about the smallest piece, and then it says that it could cut through 2 threads instead of a knife, and you're saying that the sharpness, which usually we imagine that it's a degree of sharpness that's necessary to cut through different threads, so there could be varying sizes. So I imagine that the answer would be that we're talking about the smallest piece of glass that a person would plausibly use to trim or cut a small thread. And so I can imagine we're talking about a smallish piece of glass, but as with some of the other items, I don't have personally a precise measure to offer. And we'll have to say ayin erech, eyeballing, and when we had more things that were more in the way of an approximation. But Reb Allen, it's certainly a good point. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, now we're going to get to our favorite topic, stones. So the Mishnah says a stone is to throw at an animal, and let's take a look at the Mishnah again. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yaakov says to throw a stone at an animal. So let's see what's going on over here. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yaakov. We have a little bit of noise in the background.
Sorry, it's me. I'm muting myself.
Okay, shkach. But don't forget to unmute for any to fill us in. When we talk about a stone that's going to be effectful to an animal, it has to be a stone that the animal would notice. Rashi, you have an animal with thick skin and it's large and strong. So if you throw a little pebble at it, it might not even notice. It might not feel a thing. And so it's going to have to be some size. And once again, we're going to have to eyeball it. But in case you don't want to do that, what is the size of a stone that would likely talk to an animal? We're talking about something that weighs the equivalent of 10 zuz. Mark, 10 zuz, how much does that weigh? Do we have a tool to figure that out? Again, we refer to zuz as a currency, but as we know, most currencies are based on a weight. And so Mark's going to hopefully pull up for us what a Asara zuz would weigh.
Fruit to silver. Some have is there only they got the dinar, the shell, the sheker, and the ma, but they don't have a pruta, but no zuz. Why do I know zuz? Does this have another word in Hebrew?
Give me a second. Let's pull this up. Want to Google that while we look?
Pandani, which I've never heard of before.
Like a Kruger Rand represents an ounce of gold.
Right. But let's see what's 10 zuz.
If we have a choice, let's take the Kruger ends.
It says it's ancient Jewish silver coin during the Bar
All right.
Kokhba revolt.
Well, here we'll suffice it to say, those who studied the Gemara at the time it was composed, and the Mishnah certainly knew exactly what is weighed, and that's what we're at. That's how much a stone was. By the way, I don't imagine we're talking about something that's very heavy, because we're talking about something that the animal is going to notice. Not
4 zuz make a shekel.
so we're talking about 2.5 shekel, right?
That's 10
4
yeah,
zuz is a shekel.
Yeah, 4 zuz is.
So how much was a shekel? I know that measure varies.
I did shekel in there, didn't I? No. Yeah, silver shekel is okay. So we went 10.
So how much does a silver shekel weigh?
Silver shekel is it's the same as 2 dinar, half a sella.
All right.
They don't 384 pruta, but that doesn't say anything as far as weight.
All right, so we'll look it up. Anyway, suffice it to say, we're talking about a few quarters.
What we said?
Not-
we said 1.5 shekels, right? So it's 8.45.
No,
grams
2.5
by
shekel.
2.5 shekels. Okay, so get out the calculator. 8.45 grams. A lot of math here. 8.45
So
times 2.5. That's about 211. Oh, that can't be right. I forget it.
all right, we'll revisit it. Let's take a look at what happens.
21 grams, so not quite an ounce. An ounce is 28 grams.
So we're talking about a stone that weighs less than an ounce.
Yeah.
So nothing
pretty
too
small.
remarkable. Pretty small. Wait, hold on. That's 1 shekel is
No,
just
that's-
under an
that's
ounce.
2.5 shekels.
2.5 shekels still under an ounce. Okay. All right. Zunin.
What- to put that 211 into 21.11.
All right.
Change that.
Well, once it,
That's
all right, folks, put on your seatbelts. Get ready for this next Gemara. It's not going to be hard. It's just going to be a flashback to Masechus.
3/4 of an ounce.
3/4 of an ounce. Okay. Zunin, once upon a time, a man named Zunin. All the base medrash, he comes into the base medrash to the study hall where the Chachamim are assembled. Amr Lehehu, and he tells them, Rabbi Sai, my rabbis, my peers, my fellow scholars, I need your help. Avonim shel beis hakisei shiurim bekama. What is the dimensions of a bathroom stone? What is a bathroom stone? Rashi. Well, let's back up. Who is Zunin? So Zunin apparently was a Talmud Chacham, although there was some discussion in the commentaries because his name comes up in a few places in the Gemara. There may have been more than one person called Zunin, but here it's pretty evident that Mr. Zunin is a Shabbos observant person. Elsewhere, it's plausible that Zunin was not Jewish. He may have been a Gentile. So basically, it's possible he had 2 people called Zunin, one who's referenced in Maseches Avodah Zarah, who may have been a Gentile, and here Mr. Zunin was a Jew, and he's asking about the stones of the Sherutim. Now, today, unless there's some kind of decorative sculpture, you're not going to find rocks in the bathroom. But let's read Rashi. Shi'uram bekama lihischayev aleihan. To be chayev for carrying inami l'tatal b'chatzar ulachnisan v'esakisei the idi v'idi chachiru the midi dechazel mechayev al. There was a question. As we know, you're not allowed to carry stuff that's useful. Also, as we'll see soon, there's a question which we'll discuss about muktzah. Typically, you're not allowed to handle stones. And so he wants to know a question. What is the stone of a bathroom? What is the stone of a bathroom? So I regret to inform you that at the time of the Mishnah and the time of the Gemara, they did not yet invent toilet paper. And so there was a use of stones for cleansing. And he wants to know the standard size of stones. Amr Loi, so they respond to him. Here's the deal. Kizayis, ke'egois, uchebetzva. There are actually typically a set of stones with 3 different measures to be used in the process of cleansing. One the size of an olive, one the size of a nut, and one the size of an egg. Rashi. Shalosh machnisin lekinuach. 3 stones are used in the cleansing process. Umekaneach zu achar zu, and they are used in succession. Achas kezayis, achas ke'eges, achas kebeitza. One olive size, one a nut size, and one an egg size. And anyways, for matters of hygiene, they would be used in succession to provide ideal cleanliness and hygiene. Amar lahu. So he says, "V'chi tur tonei yachnis." How is he going to know? So this is actually a brilliant question. This is again, let's forget about the restroom for a moment. And let's think about how we've always been wondering about the precision, the precise measures of stuff. And so throughout the Gemara, we've been satisfied to talk about eyeballing, guesstimating, or using our very best education to know about a size. And never until now have we talked about using a measure. Here, he says, okay, rabbis, you're telling me that there are precise sizes. Well, how am I supposed to know if they are the exact size? So I need to bring in a little, what do you call those things? Like a jeweler, you know, the tool that jewelers use to measure the size of a loop? No, a loop. So the Gemara says, you know what, you're right. Nimnu v'gamru meloy yad. We have a less precise measure.
I think you're talking about a caliper.
A caliper, I believe so, yes. Oh, so am I supposed to take a caliper or some other kind of measure to figure out the precise dimensions? Is it the size of an olive? Is it the size of a nut? And so they tell him, actually, you're right. Nimnu v'gamru, the consensus is Miloi hayad. A stone can be the size of a hand, a fist. And we're not going to make you meshuggah to measure them.
Rashi translates totane as a weight.
A weight, right? So that's why I initially said a weight, but I'm imagining that it's. Let's see, how does Rabbi Steinsaltz translate it? A scale. He says the same thing. Okay, so all right. So they say nimnu v'gamru meloy hayad. The story is you take a handful of stones, and if it fits in your hand, it's going to be approximately the size, and that's good enough. Rashi, bein shlosh ton, I feel hein dal v'hei, bein kula meloy hayad. Whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stones, approximately how much stones are needed for this hygienic process? Well, a handful. Rabbi Shimon, Tanya, indeed, a Brisa says, Rabbi Yossi Omer, we have this very conversation recorded, preserved as 2 different opinions. Rabbi Yossi says you need 3 stones, one a kezayis, one a egas, and one a beida. Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yossi, I believe this was his son, but I'm not certain. He says Mishum Aviv. Oh yeah, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yossi, Mishum Aviv, Malay Hayad. Ultimately, this is a very precise set. Dr. Hammer, we can imagine our Israeli yeshiva students sitting in front of the base medrash, selling special stone kits alongside their Hanukkah pre-poured, oil. So we can imagine such an arrangement. But Rabbi Shimon says, in the name of his father, ultimately, Malay Hayad, it is sufficient. Yes.
It doesn't seem right to me.
What doesn't seem right to you?
They take stones and they wipe themselves with that. What do they do with the stones after?
So you're not asking a halachic question. We're asking a historic, factual question.
Yeah.
Which is what did human beings do before they discovered toilet paper? And I regret to inform you that they had more primitive things to use. We imagine it was maybe leaves or water, but apparently stones. Now, what I can't inform you, but I can use my imagination, is that most likely these stones were more smooth and less ridged. And I don't want to get too graphic or, take our imagination to places we don't want them to go. But what we can be pretty confident is that this is indeed how things worked.
Alan, I can tell you.
What did they do with the stones?
Alan, I can tell you within my lifetime, in the old days, oranges were wrapped in very soft paper. And those papers from the oranges was the basic item used.
Yeah, but here we're talking about stones.
All right,
Yeah.
so hold on. Alan, I wish I could tell you that we're not going to go. I mean, I wish we have the privilege to study
So
Torah.
they used
I-
them and then they washed them.
So indeed, there's going.
Where?
Hold on. Time out. The Gemara is actually going to discuss this, so I don't want to spin our wheels unnecessarily. Suffice it to say, there's going to be a little bit of a discussion about this matter. But Alan, I thought what you were going to ask me, and I don't have the answer prepared for you, but we need to think this through, which is why all of a sudden here is the Gemara asking the question of the precision. Why wasn't it asked in any of the other contexts? So the easy answer is going
The
to
girl asked it in the beginning.
right. No, we've been asking it since we started this discussion. We've been asking every time, what's the precise measure? Why aren't we afforded a
That's
precise
right.
measure?
That's right.
And so Alan, I expected you to ask this very question.
We needed,
So I'm gonna
we needed a non-Jew to come in because
No, he's Jewish. He's
a
Jewish.
little here, a little there, no big deal. The goy wants to know exactly.
So there's a few answers that I'm going to give you. Number one, Maisa Shahaya, we're conveying a story. So he happened to be the guy who asked the question. So it's recorded like this. There's another answer, which is here we're talking about a person has to go to the bathroom. And so there's more of an urgency about going to the restroom, as opposed to if you're going to walk out of the house, you should figure it out.
So are you allowed to carry stones in your pocket on Shabbos?
No, apparently not.
So where do you get the stones?
So let's see. So
It's a big problem.
So hold on, Alan. So there's two problems here, and we're going to talk about it in a moment. Problem number one is, okay, are they muktzah? Well, if they're muktzah, so what is a person to do? That's question number one. Question number two is, can you carry it if you need it? And so let's see the Gemara. The Gemara is not done yet. Taner Rabbanan.
Just to serve you for 1 second, it's
Yes.
not so ridiculous. Today we have a shaila, can you tear toilet paper? That's why
Right.
many schools will put in tissues to avoid you tearing. You know, it's things we're struggling with ad hayom.
Indeed. Listen, these are important issues, and many a Jewish home have a pre-Shabbos ritual of tearing toilet paper. Others will buy tissues, but certain plumbing systems can't handle anything other than the very fine toilet paper. And so many Jewish homes have the very, very important pre-Shabbos ritual of tearing toilet paper. Go alert a sociologist to write a study on the but anyways, okay. Taner Rabbanan b'Shabbos. In the context of Shabbos, we're taught Shalosh Avonim Mikur Zalois Mutar Lahachnis Lebeis Hakisei. So here is another bryce on the subject of stones in the restroom. Three pointy stones can be brought into the restroom on Shabbos.
So that's not carrying, that's the issue of muktzah though, right? So that's carrying.
I'm sorry.
This here they're saying you can carry them in, or there's not an issue of muktzah.
Hang on. Right now we're talking about muktzah, I believe.
Yeah.
But ultimately they're going to be somewhat synonymous. The kind of stone that you're allowed to bring into the restroom because they're functional for this use are going to be the very dimensions of stones that are certainly problematic to carry on Shabbos because they're useful, right? So ironically, the stone that is allowed into the restroom may very well be the stone that you're not allowed to carry. The sages taught you're allowed to bring in sharpened stones. Apparently, there was a specific science to how the stones needed to be prepared. The Kama Shiur and what is the size? Rabbi Meir Omer Ke'egos. Rabbi Meir says it's the size of a nut. Rabbi Huda Omer Kebeitza, the size of an egg. Amar Rav from Bar Papa. Amar Rav Chisda. We have, ironically, an identical debate about the dimensions of an esrog. Hold on. The Gemara asks, what do you mean? We have a Mishnah and we have a Brisa. In the Masechet Sukkah, there's a discussion about the dimensions of an esrog. And in the Brisa here, we have a discussion about the size of stones on Shabbos. before we talk about if there's any correlation, and I don't believe there is, between the esrog and the stone, besides for a hashgacha pratis, if you will, of an identical dimension, but the Gemara has a technical problem here. Rav from Bar Papa says in the name of Rav Chisda, the machlokes about Shabbos can be applied to the machlokes of esrog. The Gemara says that is stated incorrectly. What is of greater authority and what is more prevalent and well known, a Mishnah or a Brisa? And the obvious answer to the Gemara, maybe it's not obvious to all of us, is that the Mishnah is a much more well published and known text. The Braitot are helpful, they're authoritative, but they aren't quite as prevalent. And therefore, before we go further and discuss this common connection, we need to revise the statement. Ella, ki machloikes be'esrig, kach machloikes kan. The appropriate way to express this notion, this idea of common measurements and common debate about the dimensions of an esrig and a stone should say, you know what? Similar to the discussion about how big a kosher esrig is, we have a similar discussion about the size of stones here. Let's read Rashi. If you're a little lost, I don't blame you. Just bear with me a moment. Hasa masnisin. Plukta de esrig masnisin. The debate about the dimensions of an esrig, this is from a Mishnah. Vihi sidura bifi hatalmidim. And this is basic training for a yeshiva student. If you were a scholar of Jewish law, if you were a sage worthy of engaging in the Talmudic process, you would absolutely need to know the entire Mishnah. And therefore, it's always going to be your first point of reference. Hacha Braisa, v'yesh harbe talmidim shaloi shna'uha v'hitoila hayedua b'she'ena yedua. Not everybody knows all of the Braitot. The Braitot were floating out there. Certain people had certain Braitot. And so it would always be appropriate, just and for intellectual integrity, it would always be appropriate to reference the Mishnah as the starting point and to say, you know, there's a famous Mishnah we all know, and there is a parallel that can be discovered in one of the Braitot. So this is very much this is not really a debate over here or a discussion about the facts, but more about the formula of how it would be appropriate in the language of the Torah scholars. Kach machloikes kan. V'l'simona ba'alma amra. Anyways, basically, this is just like a trick. There isn't necessarily a deep thematic commonality, but because not everybody knows the Brisa, by hedging this other halachic matter on to the laws of esrog, it'll allow us to recall this measure as well. So again, here, why does the Gemara cite this Brisa as a mnemonic to recall the dispute of the esrog? That doesn't make sense. More likely, a person is going to need a mnemonic to recall a lesser known Brisa. So Rish Steinsaltz actually does a nice way of explaining it. This isn't even like a quirk on getting it right. It's simply framing this trick in a way that'll be helpful for the students. But now we have another question, which is, why are we comparing the two? So it seems like Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda have a debate about what's the standard thing that fits in your hand? Is it a size of a nut, or is it the size of an egg? Apparently, so there may be something common, but not because there's anything similar thematically between a stone and an esrog. Besides, for they both need to fit, or they both can fit in your hand.
Rabbi, in your hand is very imprecise. There's some hands that are 3 times the size of others.
Indeed, as we've discussed. Indeed.
However, for instance, when you measure a horse, there's a measurement of hands, how tall the horse is. You say 10 hands or so. So there is a specific measure.
Menachem and his weight by stones.
And they weigh by stones. So there is there is out there a precise measurement of what they consider a hand or a stone. It's just we don't know what it was then.
Right, and not to put words into the professor's mouth, but it's possible that initially it was a little less precise, and then eventually we were able to come up with an across the board approximation. Oh no, the approximate or an average of what a hand was. And by the way, in Hebrew, in Jewish measurements, we have a tefach, which is a handbreadth. It's essentially the same or similar idea. And the same thing here about what a nut or an egg may have been as a common measure. Let's just do a little more. We're almost at the end of our term over here.
Now
I see, what?
Rabbi?
Yes.
Now I see the purpose of having a point on the stone. It says that it's prohibited to manipulate the anus with a stone on Shabbat to discharge bodily functions.
All right, so let's read the Gemara and let's read the Gemara. It is part of the Gemara, and these were once part of human life. Don't say I didn't warn you.
Oh my God.
Amar Rav Yehuda, avaloyas a pious. You're not allowed to use a pious. What is a pious? My pious. Amar Rav Zera Karshine Babal Yasa, clods of Babylonian earth, because they weren't very functional in the restroom. Rashi, K'may shekel pisas regev. It's like a clump of earth. Shekerm glish to the hoyel mifreches lechaz lekinoach lesulatatel. You're allowed to carry a stone if it's going to help you in the restroom. You're not allowed to carry other clods of earth that will be unhelpful. Rava further said, you're also not allowed to use a stone on Shabbos. If you look at ancient medical texts, you may find that in the ancient world, the time of the Mishnah, the time of the Gemara, and I don't know about today, there was an occasional need to have a stone assist in the process, and one is certainly not allowed to do so on Shabbos. God forbid a person is constipated and they're in trouble, they might resort to desperate measures, including the measure that Rabbi Allen read for us in the Rabbi Steinsaltz and is referenced over here, the use of a stone. Rashi, from the command of anyways, okay. Maskif Lamar Zutra has a problem. The person is constipated, they need to avail themselves to all medical techniques to assist them in resolving this trouble. Listakan, should he not avail himself to this medical therapy, and should he put himself at risk? And it was a well-known principle in the Talmudic era and the Mishnah that if a person is constipated and they don't resolve it, it could lead to greater medical issues. And so the Gemara answers, Kila achar yad. We don't mean that you shouldn't at all try to resolve this issue, but it should be done in a atypical manner. Hachi, hi kederach tikavarava kederach masham zechol v'leishini mishum hasharas nimin. So he's saying a person could avail themselves to this medically suggested solution to constipation, but it shouldn't be done in the typical manner. If you have a set place which is designated for the restroom, so then how many stones can you carry? A handful. Why? Because even if you have extra, they'll be useful later on Shabbos. But if it's not in a designated restroom, then the size should be the size of a mortar that's used for crushing spices. Rashi, so ironically, this reference that he says over here, a stone used for crushing spices, it's somewhere in between the size of an egg and the size of a nut. So he's actually providing a compromise measure. If the stones have evidence of prior use, one may move it as far as the laws of muksa are concerned. Folks, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I think we're going to have to wind down our session for today. Let's do a fast recap of the subject. Again, I admittedly, this may make us feel a little uncomfortable, but as you'll notice, the Gemara halacha understands that halachic questions could arise at any juncture in human living, and the Gemara is not concerned or not ashamed to discuss and to help make sure that Shabbos observance is clear and educated all parts of human life, even the parts of the human function that are not done publicly. It is yet necessary for the scholarship to clarify this, and it's because Allah takes these matters very seriously.
Rabbi,
so again, we have hold on. Give me 1 second. Just to recap. So again, our Mishnah goes through a series of items, giving us dimensions, including bone, glass, and stone. The Gemara then asks about exactly what kind of key are we talking about, and we determine that we're talking about the teeth of a key that are attached. The glass was used to cut two threads, not an incredibly large piece of glass. The Gemara then goes on to talk about a stone, and it has to be a stone that the animal is going to notice, which leads us to a discussion about another use of stones that were prevalently used in the restroom for cleansing in lieu of toilet paper, or maybe I should say it was used in the loo as toilet paper. And there's discussion about the dimensions of those stones with multiple opinions. Our Gemara then, and of course, the kind of stone that would be useful in the restroom is also the kind of stone that shouldn't be carried outside of the private domain on Shabbos. But there is a waiver, although typically stones are muksa, there is a waiver to use them because this is a very essential part of human living. And we will discuss Be'ezer Hashem a little more about that waiver, hopefully tomorrow. The Gemara then takes on some additional discussion about the dimensions, the shape, the composition of stones that are permissible, as well as why one might use a stone for another reason other than hygiene, and some other details related to this topic. With Hashem's help, tomorrow we will close out the subject and move on in the study of the Talmud. I would like to thank our dear scholars and members of the Talmud Chabura. Although we're gone over time, let's allow another minute for any final closing comments. After that, we'll end this link, and you're invited to rejoin the study Chumash. Again, it'll be just a few minutes later than usual. So I rest my case. Please,
Rabbi,
go ahead. Yes.
I just came out of the mikveh. I think I have to go back. I was feeling nice and clean and pure.
Listen, if you're studying Talmud, you're clean and pure, and your mind is full of holy Torah.
My wife usually asks me what we studied. I think she enjoyed more what jewelry to wear and eye makeup than what I'm going to tell her today.
Well, tell her about the keys made out of bone. All right, and glass cutting threads. Any other close, Professor? It's good to have you on. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Be healthy and safe. And let's have loads of good news.
Just a quick.
Yes, doctor. Go ahead, please. Doctor?
No, just telling you, if you come over to La Mer and you ask them that you want to use the elevator, tell them where you want to go. And in the liberal spirit of the community, don't be shocked. I was this morning when it opened up because they hired some new security people. The woman taking care of the elevator not only has a mask, but is totally covered as a Muslim woman.
Fascinating.
Totally, you can see her eyes.
You can see does she have makeup on her eye?
I don't know.
Only on one eye.
Anyway, that was
Don't worry, she'll keep an eye out for you, Bernie.
What?
All right, very good.
Keep an eye out for you.
Keep an eye out, right.
All right, so I'll call them. Thank you, doctor. Take care.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.